Chippy was on, is it called Frontline? Front page. I keep wanting to call it Frontline. Front page this week. And it was an interesting conversation. And he said some interesting things about, tax the rich and various bits and bobs. Well, I subtly look for my notes because I've got so many pieces of paper. Here it is. Yeah, that'll do. Oh, in fact, this is the first clip. The first clip's about taxing the rich. And I actually think, I don't disagree with Chewie. I don't agree with him in that I would do what he's doing. But I think that we need to also understand that if we're going to have a left coalition, that does go from the centre all the way to the left. And there needs to be some ideas and policies that get those sort of more moderate people in there. We've said it before about the phrase defund the police. Defund the police is not a clever phrase because it does just give ammunition to the right to say they want to have no police, they want to have no money for police, which is not what defund the police means. It means reallocating some of the funds into other services like mental health issues for when there is a mental health emergency rather than turning up with tasers and guns. Defund the police doesn't explain that very well, so it's not a very helpful use of a slogan. Chippy basically says tax the rich is a bit like that. And I get it. I don't agree with him. I'm perfectly happy with me and us to use that phrase, but I get why someone more moderate that needs to get those centre-left voters on board might go that path, and I'm okay with it.
Because it means that ultimately governments, and yes, we're spending more money on ECE, but we're getting more money because of the parents earning more money.
What do you think about taxing the rich?
I think I don't like the phrase. And the reason I don't like the phrase is because I think that tax fundamentally should come down to fairness. Everyone should pay their fair share. Everyone should make a contribution. We all benefit from health, education, the infrastructure that we build, things like roads. We all benefit from that. We all benefit from having a police force. We all benefit from having a good justice system. We all benefit from having a defence force. So we should all contribute to the cost of those things. And the tax system should be fair, which means those on higher incomes, and I am one of those people, should pay more. And I'm quite proud to say that I'm happy to pay more as someone on a higher income. I accept that, it's a great tagline,
It fits on a poster.
And it fits on a poster, but it creates a culture of resentment about taxes. Taxes aren't a punishment. Taxes are the contribution that we all make to living in a decent society.
Yeah, and so like he's obviously much more softly. It's not the path I'm going to take. I think it's evident from tonight's rants. But I do understand how you think about, your grandparents or your retired, mum and dad or whatever, who have always sort of voted Labour. I mean, that's just something that might not quite sit with them. I don't know. I'm okay with different parts of the left evoking the same idea using different words. He is saying the same thing. He's making it fair. Others will say tax the rich. I don't think it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, okay. So my reaction to that is what soft, but yeah, he's not talking to me.
Yeah,
I'm not the audience of that show. I'm also not going to vote Labour. But this is one of the reasons why. But this is the joy of the system that we have, right? Is they have other choices. But if he can talk to the audience that would be 100% turned off by the idea of tax the wealthy, because one day they might be magically wealthy, and they don't want that. If it's a softening of the message that gets those people to vote for Labour, and those people that will accept that some changes to our tax policy is required, then yeah, sure. Yeah, but yes, my gut reaction is no. Soft.
Yeah, but that's because. But I think you've spelled it out. That's because it's not for you. Mystery Stranger says it right here. Using fair share might be better for centre folks. I think if they're all saying the same thing, and I actually think they basically are, right? In a way that is more palatable to their audience, that's okay. Because if it's all the same, but if it's all the same thing, then when they get onto the ninth floor and sit around the cabinet table with Te Pāti Māori and the Greens, whether you call it a fair share or tax work less, tax wealth more, or whatever, it's basically the same thing to draw out the legislation you're then going to put into practice.
Now I'm going to put a caveat on this though.
Go on then.
What I don't want to see is Nostradamus in effect here.
Nostradamus.
Nostradamus, trademark. When our left bloc cruises to an easy and brutal victory in the next in the next election, what I don't want is a massive watering down. Okay,
Yeah.
so everybody's agreeing that there is some sort of wealth tax. Maybe we're going to call it a fairer tax system. Maybe we're going to eat the rich. Maybe it's somewhere in between there.
Just nibble on their legs, not eat them entirely.
I just don't want Labor to fail at that first hurdle,
Yeah.
jam on the brakes and go, we can't piss off people for the next election. Because we've seen from this government how much you can move shit if you just go, fuck it, the majority of people voted for us. That's a mandate. Let's go.
But also probably depends who's asking for what. And this does kind of lead into another one of the conversations because as you can see from the heading up here, normally what you do this when you're looking for clickbait is you give the spiciest heading you can. Why Chris Hipkins believes smaller parties shouldn't quite call the shots under MMP. He's obviously talking about this current lot, Chewie. So, yep, they can go, fuck it, let's just do whatever we want. But it depends who's driving it as well. Like Luxon is a terrible leader, right? And he's got the two small and minor parties running him around. But then again, we might actually want the two smaller parties to drive Labor around. How does that work? So this is a little part of the conversation where Christopher Hipkins talks a bit about how the smaller parties shouldn't be calling the shots in a coalition government. I don't necessarily agree with him, but I can see the concerns based on if the other lot were to get in again and ACT and New Zealand First was to have a second crack at this.
But I differ a bit from the current government in the sense that, I respect the important constituencies the smaller parties represent. And I also respect that we compete with them for votes too. I don't think under MMP the smaller parties should call all of the shots. I still think that the bigger parties have a mandate to reflect the view of a much larger section of the electorate. And so I do think under MMP, you need to kind of keep proportionality in mind. Yes, there should be some concessions and some trade-offs to the other parties in order to form government. But that doesn't mean that you should be doing things that you specifically told the electorate before the election that you weren't going to do.
Like the
Yeah, but the problem with that, Chippy, is if that's a must-do to get into power, then what do you do? We've seen it work very badly for Luxon. But if a minor party goes, well, we're not going to, this is the only thing we promised we would do. This is another reason you don't want to be shitting on your potential coalition partners and their policies, because if you get into a butting heads, someone's going to lose, someone's going to look foolish, and someone's supporters are going to be pissy. It's actually there's a bit of a tightrope there.
You'd be doing things that you specifically told the electorate before the election that you weren't going to do.
Like the Treaties Principle.
The Treaty Principles Bill is a good example. The Regulatory Standards Bill, some of these things that no one knew they were voting for at the last election and now they're being inflicted on them. I don't think that's the spirit of MMP or democracy. I think, the majority should still rule in a democracy. And at the moment, that's not happening. We're currently being ruled by a minority, a small minority. And I don't think that's what New Zealanders voted for.
Yeah, but I also think that this is a hard thing to say. If we're supposed to, rule by majority, cool. No one's got majority. National didn't get majority. They got the largest slice of the pie. So if we're ruling by majority, it is kind of ruling by block. Only one party ever has had a majority under MMP, and that was Labor through COVID. So if what Chippy's saying is ruling by majority, sure, the majority is the left block or the right block, because Labor won't have a majority, National won't have a majority. So then what?
I think what Chippy's saying here is very good. Like, I don't have any criticisms of it really, but I think if our current government was acting like Chris is saying here, that they were acting with proportionality because in a mirror universe, Christopher Luxon can negotiate good, which is not what we have in our universe. We wouldn't have these ultra divisive policies.
Yeah,
we would still have stuff like all of the social housing being cancelled and emergency housing being cancelled. We would still have bad stuff, but I don't think we would have nearly as much racially charged stuff, because that is clearly coming from ACT. A little bit from New Zealand First. The anti-trans stuff is coming from New Zealand First, and it's all being front loaded, right? But I think National is more in the middle and knows that this stuff is a run straight into a hiding. But the absolute lack of leadership, the hands-off sort of delegations to other party leaders, other party policy, and just throwing it away and go, well, that's a coalition for you. Like that's the aspect of it.
It is,
and I think what I want is basically a reversal. Greens to Party Māori, Labour, and Greens and Te Party Māori just yanking Labour to the left, as hard as they can.
But that means that's not doing what Chewie just said, because that's the minor party.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I want. Now, is that massive seismic shift from right to left, or vice versa? Is that good for the country? No, it's probably not, because everyone's head would be spinning.
The thing that's really interesting about this kind of game of politics is those negotiations after a election. It's a game of poker. And I mean, we already heard that Luxon folded his hand incredibly quickly to ACT, because ACT both said and Luxon never corrected it. Yep. That the treaty principles bill wasn't a bottom line. So they never got to the point of negotiations where someone was going to have to blink. So I wonder two things, right? I wonder if you had a decent negotiator. Luxon is obviously not one of them, and that's not me taking the piss. That's just based on what we know about the negotiations for this government. What would happen? Or two, that if a minor party did actually dig their heels in, and these guys didn't because Luxon folded, and a minor party went, nope, if you want to be government, I want this, what would happen? Now, it's not a commentary on good, bad, or indifferent. I'd just be interested to know how that would work, if it would work. Like if the Greens, for example, said, we want Chloe to be Deputy Prime Minister, and we're non-negotiable on that, what are they going to do? And if Luxon said, Hipkins said that's never going to happen. And they went, well, we've never really been in cabinet. It's time. We want half the cabinet seats. Whatever it is. I'm just interested to know how that would work.
And look, I think the other aspect here is, say in that example, both of those left bloc parties have been in positions before of going, okay, well, if we're not going to get any meaningful policy across the door, we're quite happy to do supply and demand.
Supply and confidence, yeah.
So, yeah, supply and confidence. If they get to that position next year in a crushing and an inevitable victory, I think the negotiating space is going to be really good. First of all, I think Chris Hipkins is probably a better negotiator than Luxon is.
Much to the chagrin of Luxon's ego.
Second of all, he's going to be massively outnumbered going up against two groups of co-leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
Chloe,
4 against
Marama,
1. Yeah.
Yeah. Debbie.
4 against 1. Yeah.
Oh, God, what is his name?
Rawiri.
Yeah. So, look, if nothing else, it'd be interesting. But, look, I think there's more spine in the left bloc than there is in the right at this point. And I think that is going to be, look, the current government held up the left bloc as a coalition of chaos. And like it is every time, every accusation is an admission. So we've seen chaos. I don't think the left bloc would be chaos.
We've seen chaos.
You know what needs to be done.
David be thy name. So I think we've got to play this. I was just ready to wrap up. Should we skip the last one? But it is on the capital gains tax, and that's obviously a big part of what we're interested in. So it's 2.5 minutes. I might not get to the whole thing, but we'll get the gist of what Chippy said today about capital gains tax.
In our poll, we asked, do you support or oppose the introduction of a capital gains tax on properties other than the family home? 46% of voters are in support of the idea, while 41% oppose it and 13% either don't.
So that just goes to show this is not controversial anymore. I mean, this may not be a scientific poll, but every time it is polled, it is no longer controversial. For God's sake, why does anybody think that actually putting one of these in place, I mean, even if it was one more than that, your first 2 houses, so you can have a home and a batch, whatever, this is no longer controversial, right? That it can be put in, there's actually no negotiation needed. It will win you votes rather than lose you votes, as you can see by the numbers. Get onto it.
Don't know or preferred not to say.
I read something published on RNZ. This was in December, though, and it suggested that you will be campaigning on a capital gains tax at the next election, and that, quote, details would be announced as early as mid-next year. Now, it's past mid-next year now. It's July now. Any word on that, how that might look?
Yeah, well, I've said that we'll announce our policy on that before the end of this year, because I think it is important, that is a big policy area.
Now, just putting this out there to Universe Chippy, you're going to come on here and do that, eh? We're talking about you should come and announce it here and then give it to the rest of the media who won't ask the questions. You know how they don't do that?
People want to know where they stand. Certainly people to my left, on the left of politics, get really excited about tax debates. And I understand that. But we also need to talk about how we get people into good, well-paid jobs, how we, generate more wealth for the country. And we need to do that as well as ensuring that the benefits of that are, fairly shared by everybody. And you can't have one side of that debate without the other. So tax is one of the ways we ensure that everybody, gets their fair share and pays their fair share. But we've also got to make sure that we're generating, good, well-paid jobs, that we've got businesses who are doing well so they can employ more people. And I don't think you can separate those two things. I think those two things do need to go together.
So you will commit to yes or no by the end of this year?
Yeah, and look, we're going to have a different tax policy to the one we had at the last election, very upfront about that. In New Zealand, I think we've placed...
I think what they're saying is the Greens tax policy, Chewie. Don't you think that's what they're saying? Have the Greens tax policy?
Just the Greens logo crossed out.
Just a little side note. Notice he said a fair tax system again. That's the second time he's pushed that out there in this interview. So we might be getting a little bit of a hint as to their new messaging.
Far too much emphasis on buying and selling houses amongst ourselves, pushing up the price so that potentially a whole generation of homeowners is being shut out of the housing market, and not enough emphasis on productive investment, on building businesses that employ people, that allow them to earn more money.
100%.
And our tax system currently encourages people to do that, to basically go and just speculate in the residential property market. And that's not going to make us rich as a country. So I think our tax system does need to change. I understand why mums and dads have gone out and said, I've got a house now, I can use the equity I've got in my house to buy a rental property, and that can be my retirement savings. I understand why people have done that. The tax systems actually encourage them to do that. But that's not sustainable. If every person who owns a house now buys another one, the next generation of homeowners won't exist. So we have to do things differently.
There you go. And that is the end of the conversation with Chippy. Thoughts?
So first of all, that's perfect. What he said there was perfect. I want to dovetail this into something that National has been pushing out lately, is that Labour need to announce their policy right fucking now on National's timetable. And if you wind back 4 or 5 months, I probably would have agreed with that. But now I'm going to switch tacks because it's obviously pissing National off that they haven't released any policy that they can criticise or steal. So, yeah, I'm okay with it. As much as I'm on a show where we would love to analyse Labour's policies into the next election, I am happy to, as you say, Pat, keep our powder dry until they're ready to release it.
I do actually think we've said that about multiple groups, actually, giving them, fair enough if you want to hold off. That's okay.
Talk to your membership. Get it past your party so everybody's pulling in the same direction. Hell, talk to your other left bloc parties and make sure that major policy pieces are broadly speaking aligned. is a great tactic. And also just do it out of spite, because it seems like National is really annoying them because they don't have any policies left. They've done all of it.